one of my mantras when it comes to hitting is efficient, not strong. I came up with that in particular when I was working with the guys at Harris-Stowe State University in St. Louis in 2016 and 2017. So when I heard that the Cardinals were trying to get Matt Carpenter focused on being strong, I literally died. But I got better. Respect, RIP. But the efficient versus strong thing became a real point because the guys, I would have guys at Harris-Stowe who would get so focused on getting strong that they would ignore how well they were moving. And what I focus on and what I learned from working with Andres Torres is what really matters is how well you move, how efficiently you move, more than how strong you are or were. Torres was a very strong guy, but what made or broke his swing ultimately was how efficiently he moved. He was extremely strong throughout the whole time that I was working with him, 2008 through 2012, some of 2013. What made or broke him was how efficient his swing was, not how strong he was. The same thing was true of the Harris-Stowe guys. And as I've said, another mantra that I use is you don't have to move a lot if you move well. That's a statement of efficiency. And by efficiency, I mean using the body as it's meant to be used. Using the large muscles of the body, which is primarily the serape muscles, the muscles that run from the front hip to the back shoulder, technically that run to the underarm, although you can think of it as the back shoulder. Those are the muscles that are used in walking that are just kind of the prime movers of the body. I've seen people talk about separation being in the front shoulder, and that's just wrong. Anyone who thinks separation is about the shoulders doesn't know what they're talking about. They need to spend more time reading anatomy books and understanding the game of baseball. But so, in terms of Matt Carpenter's swing and the problems with Matt Carpenter, in my opinion, his problem is one of efficiency and not strength. Matt Carpenter in 2010 and 2012, in the 1334 clip, that's one of my favorite clips of all time, when he literally hit a ball out of the stadium, out of the Braves spring training stadium, that's Champion Stadium at the ESPN Wide World of Sports down at the Disney Complex in Orlando. He hit that ball out in right field. There are the pavilions with the tents, the white tents way out in right field. He hit the ball over those tents in right field. He was a scrawny guy. He still is a scrawny guy. That was a very, very efficient swing. Yes, he's strong. He's probably disproportionately strong. His muscles work more efficiently than other people's muscles of the same mass. But what was characteristic of that swing in the 1334 swing and in the 2010 swing, which was actually an even better swing, I would argue, of Carpenter's, was it was a very, very efficient swing. He moved very well. He created separation very, very well. So for the Cardinals to diagnose his problems, Matt Carpenter's problem, as being one of strength is a very naive statement, and one that is very misguided, sadly, commonly misguided in my opinion. I have had some hope in the past couple days, because it seems like Carpenter is rejecting that diagnosis, at least to a degree. He seems to be more focused on his approach, seems to be rejecting at least some of the strength stuff. Strong is good to a degree. You have to have the bicep strength in order to maintain the box, in order to be able to swing from the inside out. There's a reason why guys who do steroids tend to hit better. It allows you to maintain that inside out swing, to maintain that tight turn. But it's more a matter of efficiency. And I think what happened, given that Carpenter's decline was in 2018, and that corresponded with Tommy Pham's decline, which was also in 2018, and I know what the problem with Tommy Pham was, which was he was taught to, somebody taught him, I don't know who it was, but I suspect he received some pressure from within the Cardinals organization to get rid of the hitch in his swing and take his hands directly to the ball. It wouldn't surprise me if Carpenter was taught the same thing, because Carpenter never had a hitch in his swing, always had something of a hands to the ball swing. In the 1334 clip, he did a decent job of just kind of keeping his hands up. In the 2010 clip, he did a better job of keeping his hands up, but he never really had a distinct loading up movement. There was no distinct lift to his swing. And I know for a fact that Pham was advised at least, to take his hands to the ball, which took out all the stuff that I had advised Pham to do in 2015. That was really the thing that fixed his warning track power. And I'll talk about Pham in a little bit, because it's all related to this, and I'm sure people are interested in kind of my history with Pham and what kind of made Tommy Pham into the hitter that he is. So I think what happened was, with Carpenter, was he was already right on the edge of, he didn't have the Pujols kind of lift to load, hitch to load pattern, which I believe is the ideal pattern. The kind of the hitch, which you certainly see in Pujols. In my definitive clip of Pujols, my favorite clip of Pujols, you see it, it's clear, it's obvious. That's one of the reasons why Pujols' swing is as short as it is. Even though it's long from a distance standpoint, even though Pujols' hands travel a longer distance, Pujols' swing is shorter because it's biomechanically more efficient. Carpenter never had that distinct loading movement. His hands would basically just kind of hang in space. That was more distinct in 2010, became a little less distinct in the 2012 1334 clip, but was still visible. There wasn't the leaky hands that you see in other hitters. But in 2018, you started to see some evidence of leak in Matt Carpenter's hands. Leaky hands was definitely the problem in Tommy Pham. He had clear evidence of leak. He was obviously employing a different pattern in 2018 than he was in 2015. than he was in 2017. Really 15 and 17 were the years to look at Tommy Pham, although Pham got back to that kind of small lift to load, hitch to load pattern in 2019. This clip that I use a lot recently is one of my absolute favorites of Pham, and that shows this kind of lift to load, hitch to load pattern extremely well. But so this tiny little change that was made to Matt Carpenter's swing in an attempt to make his swing, I suspect, shorter by making his hands more direct to the ball, actually made his swing longer. Because there's a paradox here in that if you want to make a swing, or when it comes to thinking about swing length, stop thinking about distance and start thinking about time. Yes, this is shorter in terms of distance, but this is shorter in terms of time. A hitch is longer in terms of distance, but will tend to be shorter in terms of time because a hitch will tend to be more biomechanically efficient. A hitch will tend to create more separation. A hitch will tend to make a hitter move better. And that's where we get into Tommy Pham. And really, if I ran the zoo, if Matt Carpenter called me up, I would encourage him to at least get back to the 2012 13-34 pattern, if not the 2010 pattern where his hands just kind of stayed up there. I would recommend that Carpenter put in a little bit of a hitch, not a major one, just a small one like you see in Pham in 2019 in particular, or like the one you see in Pham in 2015 when he really went off. It doesn't have to be a big movement. It just has to be enough to create that resistance, to create that separation, to get the shoulders behind the hips, to create that stretch, that separation, that efficiency. You don't have to move a lot if you move well. You can accomplish the same thing, and Torres accomplished the same thing in 2009 and 2010 in particular, with a scap loading movement where instead of lifting his hands, he would take them back a little bit with just a little bit of a scap load. But again, this was not a big movement. This is a couple of inches of scap load. But the key thing is it was timed extremely well. As his hips were opening up, he was loading his hands. Just a very, very subtle movement. And it's just that small little movement properly timed is the definition of an efficient swing. So Tommy Pham, what happened with that? How does that relate to Matt Carpenter? How can Carpenter learn from Pham? How can people learn from Pham? So the gist of Tommy Pham is this. You know how sometimes people say they're going to do something and then they don't? Well, that's what happened with Tommy Pham and me. I work with minor league hitters, but minor league hitters generally don't have any money. There are bonus babies out there, but I haven't worked with the bonus baby. I generally work with lower round guys who are scuffling. So my deal with minor leaguers is I don't charge you anything as long as you're in the minor leagues and you're not making anything. Because in that case, you're making, well, if you're lucky, you're making $2,000 a month. More likely, you're making $2,000 for the whole season, which is insane. But in the big leagues, you're making $2,500 a day. So as long as you're not making any money, I'm not expecting you to pay me anything. But when you get to the big leagues and you're making $2,500 a day, I expect you to pay me. And that was the deal that I made with Tommy Pham. Made that deal late August, early September 2010, while he was at AA Springfield. Shook hands with him. I'm from Missouri. Verbal agreements in Missouri are legally enforceable. In Missouri, you take guys at their word. He seemed genuine with that, so I took him at his word. I thought, if you shake my hand, I believe that you're going to honor your word. If I ask you to remember me, which I did, I believe that you're going to remember me when you make it to the big leagues. That's not what happened, obviously. Now, I have a tweet from Tommy Pham which demonstrates that he did, in fact, seek me out and work with me through 2015. This tweet is from 2017 and says that he didn't work with me or ask for my help in 2017, but it doesn't say that he didn't ask for my help prior to that, which he did. So at least he's admitting that he asked for my help. But, so the fix for Tommy Pham is very similar to what I would recommend Matt Carpenter do. And it's funny, a lot of the I'm taking a risk by putting this video together because a lot of the fixes for guys are very much the same. Carpenter, Torres, a lot of the Harris Stowe guys had problems with leaky hands, with loading. A lot of it was they had sequencing problems. This is some primo stuff that I'm talking about here. But so basically, I worked with Pham kind of hard through 2010. Then I didn't talk to him for a while because he got hurt. We reconnected in 13 and 14. He got a brief call-up, kind of a token call-up in 2014 just to kind of get acclimated. Then we started working hard again in the off-season between 14 and 15. He was called up around the 4th of July 2015, got his first hit, got his first home run. He did have a problem with warning track power, and that was the big thing that we really worked on during the course of the 2000 season, from basically the 4th of July through July and August, kind of between the big leagues and AAA. It was just loading and the timing of his load, talking about the hitch. We talked about coil some. I'm not going to talk about coil right now. Coil was a big thing. I'm not going to talk about that right now. But a lot of it, when it came to getting Tommy Pham over the hump, was dealing with this problem of warning track power, where when he came up to the Cardinals in early July 2015, he was smacking the ball, but he wasn't hitting it hard enough to get hits. He was hitting hard line drives, but they weren't getting into the gaps. They weren't getting over the heads of the outfielders. They weren't getting over the wall. So that was when this topic of efficient came up. And again, Tommy Pham is a very, very strong guy, but he wasn't using his strength as well as he could. His swing wasn't as efficient as it could be, and that was causing him problems. So the fix wasn't for him to get stronger, rather the fix was for him to get more efficient. And a lot of that was talking about hands and hand positioning and loading and lifting his hands and where to start his hands. We spent a lot of time talking about hands. I didn't completely understand everything that he was talking about hand positioning at first, but ultimately what we were talking about was hand position and putting him in a good starting hand position. You know, he was talking about how far away to put his hands and how close his hands were, but what I was trying to do was put him in a position where his hands were in a good position where he could load his hands, he could hitch his hands, and end up in a good position where he wasn't too barred out on his front arm. He could still keep some flex in his front elbow, and be in a good position to make a good powerful turn in an inside out tight position. We had some conversations about hitch and whether a hitch is a good thing or not, because there's a lot of I think he got some pushback from within the Cardinals. I spent a lot of time sending him clips of Pujols, and we went over clips. When he got called up, I went down and met him in St. Louis. We went over some clips of Pujols, and I just kind of talked him through. We went over this clip of Pujols in particular. But a lot of what we were doing was I was giving him permission to do what Pujols did, and I was coaching against a lot of what he had heard and a lot of what he had been taught. And this, I will say, one of the things that we talked about that he never really became comfortable with was the front foot. And this goes to, since I'm talking about current topics in hitting, I should talk about the front foot and the whole closed front foot thing, and in particular, the scissors thing. I believe that there's no merit whatsoever to the idea of a closed front foot or the scissors. The scissors move that you see is the result of the closed front foot. And the reason why you're seeing more hitters doing the scissors thing is because you're seeing more hitters doing the stupid closed front foot thing. If you close the front foot and still try to swing hard, you're going to see the scissors. Just watch that. And you can see it in Pujols in particular, and that's one of the reasons I picked it up was by watching Pujols. As over the years Pujols started, he never really opened up his front foot. He kind of started out at like a 45 or 60 degrees when he first started out his career, but didn't have much of a scissors. But over the years, as his front foot closed, he would develop more and more of a scissors, kind of this back kick, this backwards kick. And then he started to get hurt. So it was that pattern that I started to pick up on. This back foot kicking back here, and then Pujols got hurt, and I know that McGuire was teaching that to Pujols. And if you watch Ted Williams, you know, he's a lefty, I'm a righty, but Ted Williams always had a fairly open, at least a 60, 75 degree front foot, no scissor whatsoever, just up on the toe. And if you watch Pujols, when Pujols was really in his prime, had this kind of 45, 60 degree front foot, maybe he'd pivot on his front foot or pivot on the heel of his front foot, he would just end up on his toe and then just kind of recoil back with no scissor. The reason you are seeing the scissor move in hitters is because more and more hitters are being taught or are doing this stupid closed front foot thing. What's the point of the stupid closed front foot thing? Well, there is no point. The closed front foot thing is designed to keep the hips closed. Well, why in the world do you want to do that? Because the front foot keeps the hips closed, and if you keep the hips closed, then how are you going to rotate? Now that gets into this whole direction thing, and I'll talk about that, but that's another stupid idea. Direction's a really, really dumb idea, misdiagnosis. Most problems that are diagnosed as problems of rotation are actually problems of the timing of that rotation, not the problems of rotation itself. As I said, you've got this big muscle group that runs from the front hip to the back shoulder, technically the underarm. It's a rotational muscle. We're designed to rotate. We walk by rotating, by alternating rotary movements. Swinging is a rotary movement. It's insane to say that hitting is not a rotary movement. All this direction stuff is just the old stupid linear stuff trying to work its way back in. The reason I talked about that is that Pham and I had this conversation about the front foot. He does more of a closed front foot, and you can see more of it to a degree, but he had more of a closed front foot because Trout has more of a closed front foot. And you'll notice that Trout has the closed front foot, also does the kind of kickback thing. The only reason Trout does the scissor thing is because of his closed front foot, not because there's anything of value to it. This is what I call cargo cult coaching. People are coaching movements that they see without understanding the movements. There's no understanding there. They're just blindly copying movements. So Pham in 2015, he comes up, he does pretty well, gets his first hit, I think it was a double, hits a home run, it's a wall scraper. He didn't actually know the ground rules, so he stopped at second base. It was just over the wall, into some flowers in left field. But we did have to we had to make his swing more efficient, and we did so by fixing his hand position and just putting a little bit of a hitch into his swing, which took some time because that was, to do that, you had to lower the front elbow. The Cardinals like that front elbow to be down, but then they wanted to stay down, and I had to give Pham permission to let that front elbow float up into a position of alignment. Eventually he got comfortable with it, especially when he saw the results after he was sent down to AAA. He could see that kind of letting that front elbow come down and then letting it float back up, it created a resisting movement, it created a hitch that was a very effective, efficient pattern that really led to him going off in late August 2015, early September 2015, to the point where he put up like $10 million worth of value in just like a 10 or 11 day period. The mistake he made, the way he got off the rails in 2016, is he ended up going to John Peabody, I think. So in 2015, after Pham went off for that week, I asked him, I'm like, okay, so you're obviously a major leaguer now. I need you to live up to your side of the deal. I need you to start paying me. He refused. Broke off our relationship, and he started working with John Peabody. John Peabody, I believe, is a hit tracks guy. But so basically what Peabody did was Pham spent a lot of time in the cage and started focusing on hitting cage bombs. So this small little load hitch that I had put into Pham's swing that you really saw on display when Pham hit the home run onto Waveland Avenue on Wrigley Field, Peabody then turned into, or at least didn't inhibit, Pham developed this big kind of pump. And that's why Pham's numbers fell apart in 2016. And I wasn't in communication with him I was working with, I knew the Cardinals' assistant hitting coach and was working with him with a couple other hitters, Holiday, Peralta, those kinds of guys. Ended up feeling bad for Pham and kind of circled back to him in 2017 and helped him kind of get back to the stuff that we'd done in 2015. But it was, again, it wasn't a question, what happened in 2017, what worked in 2017, wasn't a question of these big movements. It wasn't a question of moving too big. It was a question of just getting back to a movement pattern that was very, very efficient, that was well timed, that didn't move a lot, but that moved well. And you can see from the numbers that Tommy Pham put up in 2017. Again, you don't have to move a lot if you move well. You don't have to be super strong. You don't have to focus on being super strong if your swing is efficient. Acuna, same thing. Okay, for one thing, I don't delete tweets, so you can see my opinion of Acuna changed. Why did my opinion of Acuna change? Because his swing changed. When I first started seeing swings by Ronald Acuna, what I saw was a hands directly to the ball, leaky hands, no load, no hitch, no lift, indistinct start of the swing. As a result, it was at a minimum almost impossible to determine the start of his swing. And from what I could tell, it was Ronald Acuna had a long swing. The fact that he was dropping bombs and hitting the ball 450, 500 feet meant people would send, they would retweet stuff at me thinking that would prove that I was wrong, and I'm like, that doesn't prove anything to me. A long swing will very often lead to extremely long home runs. And they're all right. When I say a long swing, I mean a couple things. And a lot of it, well, all right. A long swing means two things. It means time. It means time and it means distance. It means that it takes a little bit longer for the swing to get up to speed. And because of that, it takes a little bit more distance for the swing to get to contact, which means that you will tend to see the point of contact a little bit farther out front. Now that will lead to power because the barrel has this much more distance, this much more time to accelerate. So the barrel is going to be traveling this much faster at the point of contact, which means the ball is going to go a little bit farther, 25, 50 feet farther on the way out. So a hitter with a long swing will demonstrate at least average to, if not above average power. The problem with a hitter with a long swing is they will have below average ability to hit for average. Because the added time and the added distance it takes to get the barrel up to speed is going to rob them of the ability to see the ball and adjust to the ball. And this gets into topics like hitting the ball out front. There is absolutely no doubt that making contact with the ball here rather than at the classic power L will produce more power. And there's no doubt that hitters do hit the ball out here, and they absolutely destroy the ball when they do. I've got pictures of Albert Pujols just crushing the ball, and he's not making the classic power L. He's a lot closer to the power V. Not completely power V, but closer to the power V. But if you look at Albert Pujols on average, especially when he's hitting fastballs, he's going to be hitting the ball here more closer to the classic power L. Playing the percentages, fastballs of the best hitters are going to be hit here at the classic power L position, regardless of where they are in the strike zone. Contact on fastballs are going to be made at the power L. Generally speaking, when you see good hitters hitting the ball way out front like this, that pitch is going to be an off-speed pitch, usually a slider. Now, Jose Altuve is an exception to that rule. What is his deal? Generally, hitters can't get away with making contact with fastballs this far out front. Because yes, you'll get the power advantage, but you're going to lose the ability to adjust to that pitch. So you're going to get killed by off-speed stuff. So how in the world can Jose Altuve so consistently hit fastballs out here and not get killed by off-speed stuff? I mean, does he have supervision or something? No. He's got a guy in the dugout banging the drum, which allows him to know when the off-speed stuff is coming. So he's able to hunt the fastball and know and avoid the problem. It's not that I've spent 2 years trying to study Altuve, wrote him off as a freak because I couldn't understand how he was doing what he was doing, because it was completely counter to everything that I've learned. He was breaking every rule, and I couldn't understand how he was doing it. Altuve was hitting fastballs out here, which is why, as small a guy as he is, who does coil very well, but still, I mean, I don't care, yeah, he coils very well, but he also hits fastballs way out here, doesn't make the power L nearly as much as Pujols does. How can he get away with that? The answer is that Altuve and the Astros were cheating. Altuve didn't have to protect against the off-speed pitch the way non-cheating hitters do. Just throw every clip of Altuve from 2017 through 2019, just throw it away. And that's the problem with HitTrax. I believe that Pham got burned by HitTrax in 2016. That's why I don't know for sure that he was using HitTrax, but I have a clip of Peabody. I believe there's a HitTrax machine in the background. It wouldn't surprise me if Pham got burned by that. This swing will look absolutely great on HitTrax. You will absolutely destroy the ball. But when it comes to real pitching, you're going to have a problem defending against the off-speed pitch. You're going to absolutely crush the fastball, but you're going to have problems when it comes to off-speed pitches. There's no doubt that this will produce power. And it's the same thing when it comes to armbar, locking out this front arm. If you want to be a good slow pitch softball player, if you want to be a good golfer, lock out that front arm, because that maximizes your lever. It's one of the things that I've been working on in my golf swing, is, kind of making this turn while keeping this front arm locked out to maximize this lever. You can't do that in baseball because your front arm is part of your key to adjustability. Anyone who preaches locking out the front arm doesn't understand adjustability. They're making an optimization that won't work at the higher levels of the game. Anything can work as long as you don't have to worry about the changeup or the curveball or the slider. But as soon as you bring in good quality pitching, you can't make some of these optimizations. You can't hit the ball out here. You can't lock out that front arm. It doesn't work against good, high quality pitching. And that's why a lot of these hitting gurus, they get kind of the flash in the pan guys, some of these guys at best are kind of naive. They haven't run up against this stuff. I've been doing this for coming up on 15 years now. I've made these mistakes myself. I've seen guys make these mistakes and burn out for this reason. There's a reason why good hitters do what they do. There's a reason why Pujols and Trout and Cabrera tend to hit the fastball here, why they tend to let the fastball travel. If you don't understand what that reason is, you need to watch more tape, you need to look at more pictures, you need to understand things better, because you don't understand it. Back to Acuna. The swing that I saw, basically prior to the All-Star break of 2018, was one of these kind of optimized, was basically a slow pitch softball swing. Lots of extension to contact, absolutely crushing the ball when he made contact, but he struggled against off-speed stuff. The fact that he was crushing the ball didn't tell me anything, didn't make me feel better, and actually made me feel worse, because that was the profile of a hitter with a long swing. And then he came through St. Louis. I tried to see him during spring training, wasn't able to. He came through St. Louis in late June, early July of 2018. I got more video of him, didn't see anything that I liked. You know, his hands were just kind of leaky directly to the ball. And then over the All-Star break, and I made a bet against Acuna that he would not make the change that he needed to make. He needed to make the same change that Tommy Pham made, that Matt Carpenter needs to make. I made a bet that Ronald Acuna would not make that change. I was wrong. Ronald Acuna, over the All-Star break, made that change. I don't know if it was exactly over the All-Star break, but it was right around that time period. Over a course of 2 or 3 weeks, Ronald Acuna rebuilt his swing, put a hitch, put a load into his swing, and absolutely transformed his swing and turned himself into a completely different hitter with a completely different swing, with a full range swing. Basically turned himself into Albert Pujols. And it's the craziest damn thing I've ever seen. Because even Pujols made all his adjustments in the minor leagues. I don't think I've ever seen a hitter make that big of an adjustment in the major leagues. Pham did do that in 2015. I will say that Pham did that in 2015. We made some pretty major adjustments to his swing. But it's incredibly impressive that Acuna was able to do what he did. I don't know who he's listening to, but he did exactly what he needed to do, and he did exactly what Tommy Pham did in 2015. He put a hitch into his swing, he added some load, he added some resistance, he added some lift, he changed his hands instead of taking the ball, instead of taking his hands directly to the ball. He put a little bit of separation, a little bit of stretch, which increased the efficiency of his swing, which increased the length of his swing from the standpoint of distance, but which decreased the length of his swing from the standpoint of time, and that's the critical factor, and that's why Ronald Acuna now is one of the best hitters in baseball, and you know, I absolutely love his swing, and I obsessively capture his swing and clips of his swing because it's a thing of beauty. Sometimes he backslides a little bit, gets a little too direct to the ball, but you know, 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's a Pujolsian swing, and it's a thing of beauty, and it's absolutely a delight to watch. So let's talk about the back leg swing stuff. So Teacher Man 1986 and I met a few weeks ago, probably maybe coming up on a couple months ago at Yalta, moderated by the Narwhal. Seriously, you should get that thing looked at. That's kind of weird. Good. It was a good meeting. First night was kind of awkward. Second night was better. I think I swung enough to impress Teach that I do actually swing. I'm not going to swing here because I don't want to break anything. Let me talk about dump first, because that was one of the things that Teach and I talked about, and I still see it being taught by some of Teach's acolytes, although I don't think he teaches it as much. So dump, the concern I have with dump, dump is this. And I have a very specific definition for dump. Dump is when the barrel falls below the plane of the front arm. So this is in plane of the front arm, and generally in good hitters, the front arm and the barrel are going to move in plane. This is not dump because the front arm and the barrel are moving in sync. What becomes dump is when the barrel and the front arm are moving independently, too handsy. Now you could argue that Sheffield and Bonds and this kind of stuff is dump, but it doesn't really matter because this is all pre-swing stuff. They're not, I can do this as much as I want because the pitcher hasn't even released the ball. If you look at Sheffield, if you look at Bonds, they're doing this kind of stuff, but when the pitcher's about to release the ball, they get into this kind of tighter classic position where they're in plane, where the barrel's in line with the front arm. I went through a lot of this stuff with the Harris Stowe guys because a lot of these guys wanted to do kind of the fancy schmancy kind of stuff. They wanted to do a lot of the forward tipping stuff. And this was when Javier Baez was doing that kind of stuff. If you notice, Baez has toned down his tipping. Josh Donaldson and I once went back and forth on some of this. I don't know if Donaldson ever talked to Baez about this, but Baez has toned down his tipping, and one of the reasons why Baez has become a better hitter is because he's doing less of this tipping, because Baez was actually tipping, he was tipping in front of his head as the ball was traveling, which created swing plane issues and made his swing very steep and created true problems with dump, which created holes in the swing plane up. Baez is a little bit, he's still tipping some, but he's a little flatter, which creates fewer holes in the strike zone. So whenever I see someone doing any sort of drill that looks like this, I want to throw up. Because if you're dumping the barrel down out of plane like this, how are you going to get the barrel back up to the pitch, especially to the high pitch? It doesn't work. Teach and I had some talk about this, and his intent is a little different, where he doesn't want the barrel to dump. He wants some movement of that, but he wants the barrel to end up on plane. And in my experience, if you do what he demoed to me, the barrel's not going to dump. You can have kind of an active loading, a Bonds kind of loading, where I'm starting at vertical or even past vertical, and then as I get flat and come around, I'm getting on plane, but I'm never dumping here. The barrel's never dropping down here. The barrel's always staying in the plane of the front arm and staying on plane of the pitch. The problem that I have, the concern I have, is when I see people demoing and people practicing this kind of a movement where the barrel is way below the plane of the front arm. That's dump. And the problem is that how do I get the barrel back up here in time to hit the high pitch? So that's dump. And dump can happen back here, but if it happens back here, theoretically, sometimes when the barrel's dumping back here, that's because the hitter is just trying to uppercut the ball. And a slight uppercut is what we want. A gigantic uppercut is not what we want, because then you're coming through the strike zone way, way, way too steep. You know, the pitch is coming through the strike zone like this. Even the curveball's like this. You don't, just as you don't want to chop down too much, you don't want to lift too much. This kind of a gigantic uppercut is often caused by throwing batting practice when you're standing up. A tall guy throwing batting practice standing up, and rather than kind of getting down and throwing the ball as flat as they can. The one-legged stuff, I don't completely agree on that. I've seen teach a guy with kind of the stretch and fire stuff. The guy I saw, it is an effective way to teach coil. I don't think it's necessarily the best way to teach coil. But so essentially you're getting it like a 45, if this is where the pitcher or the tosser is, you're at a 45 degree to the plate. So the stretch and coil is kind of this kind of a motion. I saw teach a guy using this kind of a drill. It did work. I have other ways of teaching coil that I prefer based on what I see in Ted Williams, Roberto Clemente, basically. I do not agree that the swing is completely and entirely back-legged. From watching Pujols, I believe that Pujols uses his front leg primarily as an adjustment mechanism. Now, there's no huge linear weight shift. As Ted Williams said, primarily the movement is a coil, it's a rotation. What I teach is you want to take as short of a stride as possible to still get some momentum towards the pitcher. It's really, I don't even like the word stride, because stride gets guys too kind of lungy. I prefer the term step. If your feet are close together, then you can start talking about a stride. But if you start kind of wider apart, then it's really just a step. You just want to get some momentum going forward, but it's really just a small step forward. But I don't believe it's accurate to say that the back leg does all the work. Because from watching Pujols and other great hitters, especially hitters who are able to adjust to off-speed pitches, their front legs are doing a lot of work in terms of adjustability. Power comes from the back leg. Adjustability comes from the front leg. I think it's very accurate to focus on the back leg as the power leg. But to overlook the role of the front leg, the contribution of the front leg, the contribution of the front foot, I think is myopic. And a lot of it is just this whole focus on home runs thing. I like home runs. Home runs are good. I like doubles better. I understand why people focus on home runs and why people focus on the power leg. I spend a lot of time on the power leg, but I also, I grew up, Pujols is my favorite hitter. I like guys who can hit for power and for average. This is the power leg. The back leg is the power leg. The front leg is the average leg. I spend a lot of time on the power leg, but you also have to spend time on the average leg. I think it's myopic and short-sighted to just focus on the power leg and not pay attention to the adjustability leg to the average leg. Deceleration. I think that's an important topic, but I don't think it's taught or explained or reasoned out well. I do believe that deceleration is important because deceleration is how we transfer energy from the body to the barrel. And basically what the swing is you have a very short amount of time and a very short distance to accelerate and then decelerate the body. And by decelerating the body, you transfer that energy to the barrel. So the swing is accelerating and then decelerating, which gets the barrel up to speed. And that's one of the reasons why hitting is hard, is because I have to do this in a very short distance in a very short period of time. You know, Happy Gilmore is awesome, but it doesn't work in a real baseball game. In that case, you've got a lot of time and a lot of distance. In a real baseball game, you've got a short distance in a short period of time. But basically, baseball and fast pitch. Slow pitch is different, which is why you can do the Happy Gilmore thing. A baseball swing is a two-step process. Accelerating as quickly as you can, in as short a period of time as you can, in as short a distance as you can, and then decelerating. Because deceleration is what transfers the energy from the body into the barrel. As I'm turning, heel plant, turn, this is acceleration. How then do I get out of lag into contact? That's deceleration. What I don't understand is people talk about the front arm being deceleration, but that doesn't make sense to me. Because the front arm doesn't have any leverage. From a basic physics standpoint, the front arm doesn't have the leverage to decelerate anything because the energy's going this way, and the front arm can pull back, but it's not in as strong a position as the back arm and the top hand. And that gets into the question I had, an interesting question I had with the head coach of Harris Stowe in terms of which hand is the power hand. And I initially said the top hand, but that's wrong. The power hand of a hitter is the top hand, not the bottom hand. Why? Because of deceleration. The top hand is the power hand because it is the hand that is in a position to decelerate the knob and the barrel and transfer energy from the body into the barrel. I step, my heel drops, I turn. So from this point, what I'm doing is I'm doing a little bit of a push to keep my hands going and keep them up with my shoulders to maintain that connection. But I very quickly transfer, as Barry Bonds and the Barry Bonds top hand drill would do, I very quickly transfer from acceleration to deceleration, which causes the barrel to turn. And you may think that you're turning the barrel, but the fact is that deceleration could turn the barrel much faster than you ever could. That's why I focus on the top hand. That's why I believe Barry Bonds focused on the top hand. Andres Torres spent a lot of time talking to Bonds when he was with the Giants. he spent a lot of time explaining what Bonds was thinking to me. I've fed that into my Barry Bonds top hand drill. I'm going to do some updating to that. Spent a lot of time with the Harris Stowe guys talking about, what Bonds thought his top hand was doing. That transition from acceleration to deceleration. And it's really kind of amazing to think about, you've got a foot and a half to make that transition from I'm going to get up to speed as fast as I can to I'm going to stop as fast as I can. That's the dynamic to, that's the distance that I have of maybe a foot and a half to accomplish that task. It gives you a sense of what you need to be working on, why rotation is so important, how to accomplish that, the things to be working on, the spinning ice skater, the muscles that allow you to stay inside the ball, that allow you to work from the inside out, the positions that allow you to maximize your ability to rotate as quickly as possible.